In 2015, a mysterious virus sweeps through South America.
Eles falaram em Zika, doença de Zika.
Zika leaves a trail of babies with chronic brain damage.
Quand on a compris ce dont était capable ce virus, on est devenu réellement inquiet.
This is the story behind the headlines.
Il y avait une armée de scientifiques pour combattre ce virus.
It's a tale of how science has unlocked the secrets of a killer virus and the creature that carries it.
You pull out the tube and there's this really little brain inside this tube.
On comprenait pas trop ce qui se passait parce que c'était vraiment complètement inattendu.
In a worldwide battle against Zika.
The more we learned, the more it was, oh my goodness, not yet again another surprise.
In early 2015, Dr. Patricia Brasil's clinic in Rio de Janeiro begins to fill with women who have mysterious symptoms.
Eles não estavam caídos, não tinham aquela aparência de estar muito grave, de estar doente. Era só uma doença que dava um exantema, uma vermelhidão no corpo, que coçava muito.
The women in her clinic come from Rio's shanty towns, the favelas. Women like Irlana Cabral, who's 19 at the time. Irlana has a mild rash, which she hardly notices. It's gone in a few days.
Não sabíamos exatamente o que era e corríamos atrás do diagnóstico.
As thousands of new cases are reported across Brazil, doctors are baffled. Until they test blood for a virus that has never been seen in South America before and find Zika.
Encontrei o relato e comparei com os meus pacientes e disse exatamente isso. Isso deve ser Zika mesmo.
It's not only doctors in Brazil that are beginning to notice Zika.
When I first heard about Zika, as it were, in a new outbreak in Brazil, I was very interested in it, and I wanted to learn more about what was Zika before it got to Brazil.
Anthony Fauci is one of America's leading medical researchers. Even he has to go back to old medical papers to find out more about Zika.
Zika was first recognized in 1947. There weren't any human cases recognized until a few years later in 1952, and then it kind of went under the radar screen in Africa and Asia.
Zika was first found here in the lowlands of Uganda, in a forest called Zika. For 60 years, there were only 14 cases reported worldwide. None was seriously ill. Then, in 2007, an outbreak appears in the Pacific, on the island of Yap. And in 2013, in French Polynesia.
We were getting reports from French Polynesia where it was before it got into Brazil. And it was felt that 80% of the people who were infected had very few, if any, symptoms. So anything that was said about Zika ahead of time indicated that it was, if anything, somewhat of an inconsequential infection.
But when experts in France study the epidemic in French Polynesia, they notice something that suggests Zika might not be entirely inconsequential.
Lors de cette épidémie, ce qui était nouveau et qui n'avait pas été vu en Micronésie sur l'île de Yap quelques années plus tôt, c'était l'apparition de paralysie sévère chez près de 40-50 patients qui ont dû être hospitalisés parce que ces paralysies étaient telles qu'ils ne pouvaient plus respirer. C'est ce qu'on appelle les syndromes de Guillain-Barré.
Guillain-Barré is a rare condition that's poorly understood, in which a person's own immune system attacks their nerves. Doctors are surprised that the Zika virus seems to trigger the condition. But since less than 1 in 1,000 adults with Zika are affected, it remains, for now, just a curiosity.
On n'était pas non plus trop inquiet parce qu'on parlait de quelques dizaines de cas. Donc on s'y est intéressé, mais sans être particulièrement alarmiste.
The cases of Guillain-Barré in French Polynesia are a clue that Zika might do unexpected things. No one yet knows how bad those things might be.
6 states in Brazil have declared an emergency after thousands of babies were born in the country this year with suspected brain damage.
Laura was born with microcephaly.
In the autumn of 2015, hundreds of babies are born in Brazil with microcephaly. It's a condition that starts in the womb, when a critical moment of brain development in early pregnancy is disrupted.
Autour de la 10e semaine de la grossesse, les cellules qui vont donner naissance au cerveau commencent à se multiplier. Donc si une infection survient lors du premier trimestre, dans ces semaines critiques, les risques que le cerveau ne puisse pas se développer normalement sont considérables.
When a baby's head is of the normal size, it's because the brain develops and pushes up the skull and you have the normal contour of the skull. If there's anything that interferes with or destroys that process, the brain doesn't develop right and the skull becomes smaller.
The cases of microcephaly are highest where Zika rates are greatest. But no one knows if the virus is causing the condition. In Rio, panic spreads among pregnant women, including those being studied by Patricia Brasil.
Eu fiquei muito concernida. Chegavam na consulta com muito medo, elas chegavam com muito medo. Elas viviam com um fantasma da microcefalia. Meu bebê vai ser normal, meu bebê vai ser...
Patricia decides to have the mother scanned. The news isn't good.
As nossas mulheres, 29% tinham alguma alteração. Eu fiquei muito chocada, eu fiquei assim muito desesperada, porque me colocava no lugar das mães, do jeito que ele... E para mim, como mãe, isso é muito difícil. E elas...
Ilana's baby, Davi, was born with severe microcephaly.
Quando no parto meu filho nasceu, foi uma sensação incrível. Mas o que cortou essa sensação foi quando veio muito médico para cima de mim. Já tiraram do meu colo.
Davi's not expected ever to develop like a normal baby.
Eu chorei muito e me culpei. Falei que tudo era culpa minha, mas o sentimento de mãe é uma coisa inexplicável. É um amor muito grande que invade todo o nosso ser, sabe?
As tragedies like this play out across Brazil, there is a puzzle at the heart of the epidemic. Zika virus disappears quickly from the bloodstream, and it doesn't always show up in tests. So no one can be certain Zika is really causing microcephaly. But as cases soar, experts become alarmed.
La découverte des complications neurologiques chez les enfants nous a tous pris par surprise. Et on est devenu réellement inquiets.
I remember very clearly, I called an emergency meeting and I sat down and I said, okay, folks, all hands on deck. We don't have a lot of time. Women are getting infected. They're getting pregnant. Their babies are being endangered. So we need to do this really quickly.
At the beginning of 2016, scientists set out to battle against Zika. They come from many different countries. and from many different fields. They want to solve 3 key mysteries. Is Zika really responsible for microcephaly? What has turned a harmless virus into a killer? And can it be stopped? All their work will build on the one thing that is known for sure about Zika: how the virus is passed from one person to another.
Quand on met un moustique sous le microscope, on s'aperçoit que c'est tout un monde qu'on a sous les yeux. Et on va de plus en plus profond dans le fonctionnement du moustique pour bien comprendre le rôle des moustiques dans la transmission des pathogènes.
In a secure laboratory in Montpellier, Frédéric Simard raises the mosquito which carries Zika. This is Aedes aegypti, and it has an insatiable appetite for human blood.
La trompe du moustique est quelque chose de très mobile. Le moustique va trouver le micro-capillaire où le sang passe à l'aide de ce tout petit canal très très fin. Les femelles ont besoin du sang, surtout pour le développement de leurs œufs. Donc c'est par instinct maternel que les femelles piquent, plus que pour se nourrir.
When the female feeds, she injects a chemical in her saliva to keep the blood flowing. If the person is infected with Zika, she picks up the virus. It multiplies in the safety of her stomach. And later, when she feeds again, she injects the virus in her saliva, infecting her next victim. Frédéric admires many things about mosquitoes, but he spends most of his time trying to find ways to kill them.
On va exposer des moustiques à cet insecticide. L'insecticide que nous utilisons sur ces moustiquaires est un neurotoxique. Il va se fixer sur les neurones du moustique. Le moustique va être paralysé et ensuite mourir très rapidement.
When insecticides were first invented, they were seen as a magic bullet that would wipe out Aedes forever. They were to have a checkered history. In 1948, the World Health Organization even declared war on mosquitoes. And the first successful insecticide, called DDT, was at the heart of its campaign. All across the planet, Aedes aegypti was hunted down and sprayed.
In order to succeed, every drop of water must be drained or cleared.
In huge areas, including Brazil, Aedes was eradicated completely. And then, disaster. DDT turned out to be dangerous to human health and was banned. And then, the mosquito developed a weapon of its own. Each time a new insecticide was introduced, the mosquito developed resistance to it. It's been an arms race ever since.
Une femelle moustique va pondre 200 à 300 œufs tous les 2 jours, ce qui fait que ce mécanisme de résistance peut très rapidement envahir toute une population de moustiques.
In just a month, one female that's become immune to an insecticide can have up to 1 million descendants. By the 1980s, the mosquito was on the march again, recovering all its old empire, and now invading new territory too. Duane Gubela has been fighting Aedes all his working life.
If Aedes aegypti had a mind of its own and could think and reason like we do, I would hope that I would be their #1 enemy. Get rid of that guy.
The Zika epidemic has brought Duane out of retirement.
I would have never dreamed in 1971, when I started working on Aedes aegypti-borne diseases, that 40 years on, we would be dealing with a much worse problem than we were at that time. Every time I retire, it seems like a new epidemic comes along, and I have to get back on my horse and back in the fight of it.
Duane has come to Florida to monitor the spread of Aedes into the United States. More than any other mosquito, Aedes has evolved to live close to human habitat. And its behavior makes it the perfect carrier of disease.
Aedes aegypti is a very silent mosquito. You don't hear it, usually you don't feel it, and so if you're in a room with 5 or 6 people and a single Aedes aegypti mosquito is there, chances are that she will bite all of you. And if she's infected with virus like Zika, every one of you will have a Zika infection.
For a long time, no one could work out how Aedes manages to spread across the world. Duane has helped solve the mystery.
This is a classical breeding site for Aedes aegypti. They love automobile tires. Perfect conditions for the larvae.
Those eggs will hatch, and in a few days they'll emerge as adults, and that's when the trouble begins.
The key to Aedes' spread is its penchant for rubber. It likes to lay its eggs on the inside surface of used tires. These tires are often valuable and are therefore bought and sold worldwide. Every year, millions are loaded onto container ships and then transported across the globe. And the mosquito travels with them.
Tires are shipped around the world, and it takes the eggs with them. The eggs hatch, and you have Aedes aegypti introduced into a new area.
Seen from space, the shipping lanes of global trade are among mankind's greatest achievements. But Aedes has turned them into a mosquito ecosystem.
They've been around a long time, a lot longer than humans, and they'll probably be here after we're gone.
The mosquito has outwitted every attempt to beat it. But in the grip of the Zika epidemic, the Brazilian government has no option but to try to fight back against Aedes one more time.
E nós estamos perdendo a luta contra o mosquito.
Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff has declared war on mosquitoes.
More than 200,000 soldiers have begun specialized training.
This time, the target will not be the adult mosquito, but its young, the larvae. In the favelas, the drinking water is infested with them. New and powerful insecticide is added to all the drinking water. No one can be sure if this can stop the epidemic. So attention turns to another enemy, to the Zika virus itself.
I live on a lake, so I like to come out here when I either need to relax or need inspiration. When I first heard about Zika, I came out here and I started to think, how can I help?
Heng Li Tang emigrated from China to America to fight against viruses.
I was always interested in virology. Viruses are so clever, so efficient. It's fascinating.
When the Zika epidemic hits the headlines, he and his researchers are in the middle of studying other mosquito-borne viruses. They drop everything to focus on Zika instead.
Yeah, we were able to basically stop what we were doing, just kind of pull Zika in, almost switch them out at that point.
Yeah, then I said to these guys, this is it. Let's find out what happens.
The team wants to unravel the mysteries of Zika, but even finding some virus to work on is tough. So few labs study Zika, it takes weeks to track down a single tiny file. And once they have it, they're not sure how dangerous it might be.
We were worried about the potential risk of working with Zika virus. A virus that can do so much damage to a fetal brain is not something that we had encountered before.
What else can it do? The what if, what else? What are they going to find next?
To do any research, they'll need to grow lots of the virus to work on. They've already developed an extraordinary lab process to grow other mosquito-borne viruses. Now they want to see if that will work with Zika. They take cells from inside the stomach of a mosquito and add those cells to a rich medium where the mosquito cells multiply. Then they add their Zika virus to those cells. They're hoping the Zika will reproduce just as it would inside a real mosquito's body. But will it work?
We had to pretty much every 6 hours or so for an entire weekend watch these plates of cells that we had put the Zika virus on.
And then finally we thought there was something. So we took the cells, we put them on the slide, and we tried to detect virus, and we found it.
The team has now created millions of Zika viruses and begins to study them intensively. The biggest mystery of all about Zika is what has happened inside the brains of babies like little Davy. Has the virus done something terrible to his brain cells? Tang wants to know, but he's a virologist, not a brain expert.
It became clear that I needed to get a hold of some brain cells.
Tang doesn't need just any old brain cells. He needs some that are just like those inside a fetus's brain. Unbeknownst to him, somebody already has them.
As a scientist, we are always curious and drawn to mystery. So when I first saw the images actually in the news about these babies born with microcephaly, I thought maybe there's something I can do.
Neurologist Professor Guo Li-Ming works together with her husband, Professor Song. When they hear about Zika, it just so happens they're coming to the end of an extraordinary project to create their own fetus brain in the lab. They do it using a pioneering technology called stem cells.
The beauty of the stem cells is that you can make them to become a heart cell, a liver cell, a pancreatic cell, and a brain cell, of course.
What the couple do may seem like a piece of scientific magic. They take ordinary human skin cells. Then they reprogram those genetically to behave just like the brain cells of a fetus. These cells are then grown in a fluid which contains exactly the same nutrients the mother would provide in the womb. This makes the stem cells grow into a thin layer of fetus brain cells. But they're not satisfied. A real brain isn't a thin layer of cells. They need to find a way to allow the cells to grow much bigger and in all directions. For a long time, they can't work out how to do that. And then they come up with an idea.
You grow them in suspension so you can spin them and try to enhance the oxygen-nutrient absorption.
To grow the cells in suspension, they invent a little machine of their own, which can spin cells round constantly.
Everybody's really excited about it. Now we can make the mini brains develop.
To see if it'll work, Li and Song create new batches of stem cells. And this time, they place them in their little spinning machines. The invisibly small brain cells are left for weeks, spinning and growing. Until they aren't invisible anymore. The brain cells have developed into tiny globes. And inside the globes, they discover something remarkable. The cells don't just multiply. They form many of the complex connections that a fetus brain has early in pregnancy.
If you look through the microscope, you actually can see many, many different layers. You see the layers of neural stem cells, you see layers of different type of neurons, and just like in the normal human developing brain, and they form these intricate structures.
They can actually function like a real nerve cell, and they can fire electrical signals just as they do normally in the brain.
Li and Song have created their very own fetus brains in the lab, and hundreds of them. It's ideal for doing Zika experiments. But they're missing one key ingredient.
We started looking for where can we find the virus. And most of the answer is you have to wait. You have to wait for several months when the virus can be available.
So much research is suddenly being done on Zika that there is now a long waiting list for samples of the virus. The neurologists don't know that Tang's team have millions of their own Zika viruses. What forces them together is a crisis. In March 2016, a group of environmentalists claim the public is being lied to about microcephaly. Zika is not responsible, they say.
The virus becomes the cover story. This is what we're putting out here, and it sells. I mean, it's the biggest selling cover story in the world.
Zika is not the cause of microcephaly.
They claim the culprit is the insecticide being added to drinking water. Experts dismiss the idea.
In science, you don't want to be so presumptuous to think you know what the answer is right from the get-go. But on the other hand, you got to be careful of getting distracted by fantasy theories.
As always happens in these kinds of cases, a lot of alternative theories crop up.
It becomes an urgent question whether the Zika virus directly causes microcephaly or not, because answer to that question will have a direct impact on the public policy.
Spurred by the crisis, Heng Li Tang begins desperately to reach out for brain experts to collaborate with.
Suddenly, Hongjun received an email from Heng Li and asking him who is the best expert working on neurodevelopment.
I called him immediately, and the first question I asked was, do you have a virus in your hand?
The decision was made on the spot, over the phone, to go ahead.
Within days, the two teams are collaborating.
So we opened the box and we took out the flask, and it's just these flasks with these little brain cells. They were so large that you could actually see the brains in the tube.
Now, together, they can finally try to solve the mystery of whether Zika is causing microcephaly. They add Zika virus to half the samples. The others will develop as normal. What difference will the virus make?
Yeah, this was definitely a little bit of a nerve-wracking point because we have to incubate them with the Zika virus and then wait for them to develop, and that takes a little bit of time. So finally at the end, you can see, okay, what did Zika virus do to these? And it was pretty dramatic.
When they take the containers out, it's clear Zika has had a significant effect.
It's amazing. It's an amazing result.
The ones that had Zika virus on them were so much smaller.
Only after 1 week, they send a picture taken from a cell phone. It's like, wow, now this is really telling us something. And the Zika virus indeed linked to microcephaly, because the mini brains are just much, much more smaller if you compare to a normal one.
The Zika-infected brains aren't just smaller. Inside, they can see properly for the first time the trail of damage the virus leaves. Once Zika virus gets inside a fetus brain, it's able to attach itself to the crucial developing brain cells. Surface proteins then allow it to gain entry into individual cells, where Zika turns the cells into virus factories. As those cells explode and die, the brain fails to grow, causing microcephaly.
We immediately see the layers for neurons is much thinner. And that's just like in the baby with microcephaly.
When the pictures were shown of how profound destruction of cells could occur, it's chilling because you get a feeling of the destructive power of this particular virus.
The work with stem cells is a turning point. Now scientists know that Zika can cause microcephaly for sure. And as the epidemic spreads far outside Brazil, comes even worse news.
Transmission du virus Zika par voie sexuelle, mais un cas avéré.
Que una mujer residente en la capital ha resultado infectada de Zika por contagio sexual.
If you have a male who's infected, who gets Zika, and we know now it's sexually transmitted, the woman could never ever go near a mosquito and still get infected. And that just adds another profound risk to the equation.
No mosquito-borne virus until Zika has ever been able to be passed on to sexual partners. This helps spark a worldwide race to come up with the one sure solution to Zika: a vaccine. Over 20 different groups are at work. At the heart of all their projects remains a surprisingly simple-sounding concept. One that was pioneered at the Pasteur Institute, where the method of creating vaccines was first understood scientifically over a century ago.
L'idée du vaccin, c'est de présenter au système immunitaire des composants du virus qui feront que le système immunitaire va développer une réponse.
Vaccines aim to create the same response that happens naturally. In most people's immune systems, the presence of the Zika virus triggers a reaction, producing defensive cells or antibodies which attack and kill the virus. Scientists are in a race now to work out exactly what proteins on the surface of the virus trigger this defensive response. If they can create a harmless version of those triggers, they may be able to immunize everyone against the disease. They've made rapid progress.
Il y a déjà aujourd'hui des essais qu'on appelle de phase 1 pour voir si le vaccin est bien toléré. Il y a même un essai de phase 2 où on voit s'il induit une réponse immunitaire qui pourrait être protectrice, et ça c'est chez l'homme.
Despite the progress, a vaccine for Zika presents huge challenges. For one thing, there will have to be much larger trials on thousands of people. And they'll have to include a key group.
On a bien vu que la principale complication du virus Zika, ce sont les atteintes neurologiques chez les enfants nés de mères infectées pendant la grossesse. Ce sont donc les femmes, avant même qu'elles soient en âge de procréer, qui seront la cible de ce vaccin.
Trials of a vaccine on young girls will take years to produce useful results. And whether a Zika vaccine is ever worth mass-producing depends on what happens next in the epidemic. By the middle of 2017, the virus has jumped across the Atlantic to Cape Verde, near the heavily populated coast of Africa, its ancient homeland. Will Zika now cause an epidemic in Africa? That's a question Sarah Salinas has been trying to solve. She thinks the answer lies in what Zika did in Africa decades ago, and the mystery of why there was no microcephaly there in the past.
Une des questions que les scientifiques se sont posées a été de savoir si la souche de Zika avait évolué par rapport à la souche originellement découverte en Afrique et était devenue plus toxique.
Salinas knows that the Zika virus that caused the epidemic in Brazil is subtly different from the strain first found in Africa. Perhaps one of the tiny changes has given Zika the ability to damage fetal brain cells.
L'idée était, dans un premier temps, d'essayer de comparer cette toxicité entre la souche africaine et la souche qui était aussi responsable de l'épidémie au Brésil.
She and her colleague Yannick Simonin already have the Brazilian virus. But to piece together Zika's evolution, they now need the African virus that was circulating decades ago when no one much cared about or studied Zika. They search for months. Then they strike gold. They managed to obtain a sample of virus that was collected in the 1970s in Africa from an infected mosquito. It has been frozen ever since.
Ça a vraiment fait une grande différence puisque nous avions accès à une souche africaine qui circulait au niveau de ce continent.
To test the toxicity, they grow early fetal brain cells similar to those used in Baltimore. Then they add the old African Zika to some of them, and Brazilian Zika to others. They assume, like everyone else, that the brain cells will be unaffected by the African virus. That would explain why there was no microcephaly in Africa. What they discover is startling. The African strain is able to infect brain cells too.
On se demandait ce qui se passait parce que ça n'était pas du tout les résultats attendus. En fait, finalement, on s'attendait complètement à l'inverse. Donc, on a décidé d'aller plus loin afin de comprendre ce qui se passait avec cette souche africaine.
They carefully rerun the studies and find that their African strain is every bit as infectious as the Brazilian one. And by some measures, even more deadly to fetal brain cells.
La souche africaine infectait beaucoup plus les cellules du système nerveux et on s'est aussi rendu compte qu'elle était plus toxique.
If the work at Montpellier is confirmed, that will suggest that the Zika virus that has been circulating for decades in Africa has always had the ability to damage brain cells. So, why didn't microcephaly show up in the past? One reason may be that after an epidemic long ago, most Africans built up natural immunity. and the numbers of microcephaly cases from Zika dwindled.
The confusing thing about microcephaly is that microcephaly is caused by a number of things. So the reason you may not have seen it before with Zika is that the level of Zika was what we call endemic and not in its outbreak form. And there may have been cases that were related to Zika to microcephaly, but you couldn't distinguish them from microcephaly caused by other causes.
If the new Brazilian strain of Zika spreads to Africa, no one yet knows what will happen. Perhaps some people who have immunity to the old strain will be protected against the new one. But that's by no means certain. The stakes are huge, for the mosquito that carries Zika is endemic across the continent. And that's why a radical solution is being considered. In the Brazilian city of Piracicaba, they're pioneering a controversial new phase of the war against Aedes aegypti. One day, it may be used worldwide.
So we plot the points in here, and every time we go closer to the point, it beeps, telling us the right time to release.
Guillaume isn't spraying mosquitoes. He's releasing them. Lots of them.
So we release in this neighborhood 3 times a week. Every release that we do, we release something around 250,000 mosquitoes.
These mosquitoes aren't ordinary Aedes. They're genetically modified. And they're on a mission. A mission that begins here. In the world's biggest mosquito factory. Every week, they produce 100 million Aedes here. Carla Tepedino is the manager, and she's no fan of the mosquito.
Ele simplesmente causa muito dano em todos os locais que ele está presente. Então, na verdade, esse é um mosquito que, para a humanidade, provavelmente não seria nenhum tipo de problema se a gente conseguisse eliminar.
The genetic engineering that this factory is based upon took scientists 3 decades to develop. The elaborate process begins when they insert a specific gene inside an individual mosquito egg. It's a gene they developed that makes the larvae self-destruct. And it's in every single egg laid by the millions of adults here.
Aqui nós temos nossos ovos secos. A fábrica produz cerca de 1 quilograma de ovos em uma semana.
So how do the mosquitoes in the factory reach adulthood if they have a destructive gene that destroys them when they're young? The answer, all the water that the larvae grow in is infused with a special antidote that stops the gene being triggered. As long as the mosquitoes are here, they grow as normal. After a few days, the larvae have to be separated out by gender.
O macho é pequeno, a fêmea é grande. Eu consigo, através de um processo de filtração, retirar esses machos que passam pelos buracos e as fêmeas maiores ficam presas.
The females are kept for breeding, and they have to be fed. There's a 24-hour production line to supply blood for the females. They go through 20 liters every day. The males have a different destiny.
Nós liberamos esse macho na natureza e tudo que ele faz é encontrar as fêmeas que estão ali e reproduzir com elas. Essa é a grande função do macho.
When the males are released, they search for wild females. When the genetically modified male mates with a female, he passes his destructive gene onto their offspring. A few days after the larvae emerge, the gene begins to work. With no antidote in the water, the gene now makes the larvae's internal chemistry malfunction, and they die. Without offspring, mosquito numbers plummet. But the process has to be repeated continually. Genetic modification isn't the only scientific solution to the mosquito. Trials have recently taken place in which the mosquito larvae are infected with a bacteria called Wolbachia, which disables them. Whether or not either approach is introduced widely will depend on cost. Some experts worry they will prove too expensive for the developing nations that need them most.
Il faudra rester très vigilant à ce que ces méthodes de contrôle soient abordables pour les populations où elles vont être utilisées, et notamment sur le long terme. Est-ce que cette diminution sera pérenne? C'est un des grands enjeux de ces nouvelles approches qui sont proposées dans le contrôle des populations de moustiques.
Everyone has agreed something serious has to be done about the mosquito. For the Zika story is far from over. While cases have now dropped dramatically in South America, most experts think this is just a temporary lull. New outbreaks are likely to happen in the next few years. And there's worrying new evidence about the impact of Zika on babies. Patricia Brasil has continued to study findings from clinics across the country.
À medida que o trabalho foi progredindo e que os bebês foram nascendo, nós entendemos a microcefalia é só uma ponta do iceberg.
Her latest work suggests many babies who are born apparently normal may go on to develop neurological problems.
There are babies that are born with a normal size head, but then the microcephaly starts to occur after birth. Then there's visual abnormalities. There's hearing loss. So right now we're calling it the Zika congenital syndrome.
Brazil has now launched a major attempt to monitor all babies born to Zika mothers. No one's sure what percentage of babies of infected mothers may go on to develop symptoms. And it may take years until doctors find out for sure.
Essas crianças estão crescendo, se desenvolvendo, ninguém sabe como. E tem mães aí, são mais de 13 mil mães com bebês afetados.
Zika took the world by surprise. A seemingly harmless virus turned out to have a dark side, and it revealed its full menace only after decades. The struggle against it continues, for there's no certainty that a vaccine against Zika will succeed. And the battle against the mosquito that transmits it continues to get more complicated and expensive. And Zika may just be a harbinger of things to come. There are hundreds of other viruses circulating in the wild that might have even deadlier symptoms than Zika if they were ever to get inside our bodies. And there's a creature that might help them do just that. A new and possibly even deadlier mosquito has recently spread like wildfire, colonizing a much wider area than Aedes aegypti ever did, including most of southern Europe and large areas of the US. In Montpellier, Frédéric Simard is studying this violently aggressive species.
C'est une véritable guerre civile à laquelle on assiste dans cette cage, qui se passe à une échelle très fine, mais qui a des implications à l'échelle globale du monde entier.
In the cage, Aedes aegypti is being violently attacked by another species, Aedes albopictus, often known as the tiger mosquito.
Ce moustique est extrêmement agressif. Il va entrer en compétition avec d'autres moustiques, avec des moustiques locaux, pour remplacer les moustiques là où ils sont et s'installer à leur place.
The fact that this new species is attacking Aedes aegypti may sound like a good thing. But there's a big problem. For the new mosquito feeds on the blood of both wild animals and humans. And experts now fear this species could transmit an unknown virus from jungle animals straight to us, starting an uncontrollable epidemic.
Il existe aujourd'hui encore de très nombreux virus, dans des zones très reculées, dans des régions forestières tropicales. Il suffirait que ces virus sortent de ces forêts, voyagent, pour qu'une épidémie se déclenche. Et je serais bien incapable de vous dire quelle sera la prochaine.
Humanity's long war against the mosquito and the monsters it carries could be about to enter a new and even more deadly phase.